Stating the obvious and finding God in my coffee, a ramble on the doublespeak of feminism. I am your permanently dishevelled host, Moriology. There are those of us who, the day after one too many bottles of nefarious homebrew of dubious alcohol content, tend to find that the eternal quest for God begins and ends with the first cup of coffee in the morning. Of course, finding God in such a way also means that faith in humanity and in the world in general is restored as a sensation of pure, harmonious ecstasy courses through our veins with that first jolt of caffeine in the morning, kick-starting the central nervous system. The sensation of ecstasy and faith in humanity is short-lived, however, and tends to disappear quicker than a geriatric erection the moment one enters the realm of chaos and despair, also known as Twitter. Within this realm of eternal punishment, we find the banished souls, the lost souls, doomed to an eternity of anger and misinformed rage, perpetually tormented by their lack of cogent arguments and their ability to spout only barely coherent rhetoric which, when disproven and disassembled by the angels of salvation come to save their shattered souls from the realm of doom and gloom, either block, insult, or carry on with their gobbledygook gibberish passed down from the top layers of the stinking phlegm soup that is online feminist doctrine. The lost souls are truly lost. The cage within which they live is a cage they built around themselves. A cage whose bars and lock and key keep them safely and securely trapped in the fantastically woven web of pseudo-knowledge that tells them that they are not responsible in the slightest for anything wrong in their lives, as they have no control over their lives because they are, in one way or other, oppressed, shackled and chained by the might of the all-seeing, all-knowing, omnipotent and omnipresent Godhead patriarchy, crushed and smashed and destroyed beneath its thumb and glaring cock and balls. A set of ideas telling them constantly two definite truths. You are powerless, and in being powerless, you can do no wrong. To such an extent that any opposition they meet can be countered with a single, simple and conversation-destroying phrase, blah. One would believe, of course, that any movement designed, as they claim, to eradicate injustice and inequalities would be pleased, immensely so, by clear and concise evidence that their inequalities ain't there, that they ain't all they are cracked up to be. One would be inclined to believe that this would mean that they had won, and that their brave warriors of virtue and grace and morality, their knights and sacrificial stormtroopers, would be pleased to know that they have one less battle to fight. This is not the case. Of course it is not. Blah. Feminism is a self-fulfilling prophecy, prophetizing oppression, then manufacturing it in order to keep itself going, in order to be necessary and in order to make both a profit and a profit. Because feminism is big fucking business, big fucking busyness, big fucking busybodies poking their noses and claw-like fingernails into every facet of life, the universe and everything, and dedicating their time and sole purpose to dictate, manipulate and govern the lives of others, or attempt to do so. Often in minute detail. Forget personal freedom, for personal responsibility and personal choice. These disappear when faced with the might of the feminist machine, all greased cogs and micro-switches. Wanna be a housewife? You are betraying the sisterhood. Wanna be a stripper? You are betraying the sisterhood. Wanna do something that goes against the holy tenets of feminism? You are betraying the sisterhood. And as such are a gender traitor, a female Uncle Tom, and, obviously, brainwashed by the flimsy structural integrity of the patriarchy. Because women thinking for themselves instead of having feminism think for them are clearly in the wrong, and must bow down to and submit to their superiors who wish them nothing but the best, as long as what is their best falls in line with the orthodoxy of feminism. There is enormous amounts of social control, power and coercion in presenting oneself as a weak and powerless victim of circumstance, a poor and pitiful damsel in distress, much in need of being saved. The virgin, as it were, being saved from the dragon's den by a knight in shining and shimmering armor, whose sense of self and sense of value lies only in his willingness and his ability to sacrifice himself so she shall be saved. whose only value to society lies in his willingness to risk his life and his limbs and his livelihood, and thus meet the criteria needed to be rewarded the social bribes and goodies that comes from his supposed privileged position. "Please, men, save us from the other men," they whisper with trembling lips and quivering hips. "You, Sir Knight, are surely slightly less trash than other men. Please take this token as a reward for your somewhat goodliness and slightly kind-heartedness. Would the mere and slight possibility of a whiff of my panties be a fitting reward, perhaps and perchance?" Now, from what I have gathered, men are hardwired to prove themselves worthy. Men want to be seen as capable, strong, brave, heroic, able, and willing to sacrifice themselves and their lives, if need be, for the betterment of the tribe. If my understanding is correct, and I admit absolutely to not having delved into this completely, it is a relatively new topic of research for me. This is biologically hardwired. The provide and protect role rises up from the murky past of protoplasmic ooze and the hazy mist of history, flowing elegantly and fantastically through aeons and stemming from times and places of far more harshness and difficulty of life than here and now. Shades of history which cannot be viewed or understood through the lenses of our very safe, secure lives of abundance and, comparatively, wealth. Things that, quite simply, were done out of necessity back in the beginning of our ascent to the status of domesticated primates, cannot be viewed through a modern lens of morality, equality, or justice. It was a whole other state of being, a whole other state of life, a whole other phlegm soup in which to swim, or to sink and drown. It is this hard-wired desire to provide and to protect which the feminist hive mind manipulates so efficiently and wonderfully. A role of provider and protector which, in times past, at least may have granted men some respect and gratitude, but which now grant men nothing but scorn, ridicule, shame, and abuse, even when called upon to still fulfill this role by the same powers that shame men for fulfilling this role. Double-bind and gobbledygook from feminists, elegantly and brilliantly swinging from the vines of their jungle of manufactured outrage and perpetually self-fulfilling prophecy. My writings are part of this self-fulfilling prophecy, in their circular reasoning as to why feminism is still needed. Any objection to this hateful ideology of bile and stupidity is all the proof they need as to why feminism is still needed. Strange, however, that this line of reasoning do not extend to the men's rights movement. One would believe that, as much ridicule, shame, and vile abuse that the men's rights movement get handed from all of society, this is, by their logic, evidence that we surely need a movement for men and the human rights of men. Alas, it is not. The pendulum of equality must ever and always swing only one way, and that way is towards the greater good for women, which is to say the greater good for feminism. Because, as stated time and again, feminism does not equal women. Women do not equal feminism. Feminism is an ideology. Women are not. Though women may, on a surface level, benefit from feminism, it should be clear to anyone that women do not benefit from feminism, if one but scratches the surface of the thing. I would not accept any ideology purporting to speak on behalf of me who did nothing but paint me as a weak, powerless and helpless victim unable to speak on behalf of myself, and thus in need of this ideology to speak on behalf of me. I could not, for many years, fathom why so many women put up with this absurd ideology claiming to speak on behalf of them and their best interests. Then it dawned on me. There is immense social power for women to be portrayed, or to portray themselves as a weak, helpless, powerless and oppressed. Because there is no lack of men jumping into the fray to help them, to save them, to be their knight in shining armor, and to bend the knee for the slightest possibility to be granted a chance to procreate. There is no lack of men wanting to prove that they are, in fact, not like other men. That is to say, not like what she perceives or projects other men to be like. In all our intelligence, in all our wit and all our wonder and our splendor, humanity has forgotten one basic fact. We are mere animals. We, just as any other animal, are driven in no small way by instincts and by biology. And one of the greatest drives we have in common with all animals is the drive, the need, and the urge to procreate, to carry the species onwards into the wild and weird and wacky wonder of the future. For as much as feminism claims to eradicate the traditional gender roles, they sure as all hell like to play and prey upon them. The eradication of gender roles only goes so far, it seems. At a certain point, the light is bent and the light twists and turns and reaches peak enlightenment, returning, oddly enough, to the beginning of time and of life, where women are in need of protection and where men need to protect, where women are strong and beautiful, gracious and the pinnacle of morality, and men are frail and weak and fragile, toxic and primitive, barely cogent in their guttural roars and driven solely by their desire for sex when they are not busy oppressing the very ones who call upon them to save them from men and from society at all. Feminism is maddening in its constant doublespeak, in its lack of values when claiming to hold all the values, in its hate and bile and arrogance, in its totalitarianism. And it is totalitarian. It is incredibly totalitarian. Any ideology demanding to be the only ideology to speak on behalf of this or of that is totalitarian. You are either with feminism or you are opposed to equality. You are either with feminism or you hate women. You are either a Catholic or you are a bad person. You are either part of the Communist Party or you are an enemy of the state. There is no in-between. No other view and no other voice capable of speaking on gender and the issues of gender. Only feminism, and nothing more. Quote the hive mind, misogyny. And my soul from out that shadow that lies flouting on the floor. Some years back, prior to me awakening to all this gobbledygook and snoot wafflery that is feminist dogma, I had a discussion with a feminist. Now, I love music, and so the discussion was on music. I mentioned some of my, at that time, favorite musicians, who all happened to be male. Her response was, of course, and as one would expect, "What, don't you have any female favorites?" To which I replied, listing quite a few of my favorite female musicians. Patti Smith, Janis Joplin, Nina Hagen, Joni Mitchell, and more. Now disarmed, seemingly unable to attack my horrid misogyny based on the simple fact that I had quite a few female musicians on repeated rotation in my listening sessions, but apparently still longing to claim female victimhood, she replied with, "Any normal female favorites?" My favorites were not normal women, apparently, and as such not good enough to be included in the list of female musicians deemed appropriate listening for such a foul male as myself. Evidently, the longing for victim points for a feminist overshadows and overrules any evidence to the contrary. If there is no evidence of willful refusal to listen to music made by women, evidence must be created that I willfully choose to not listen to music by women, by painting said women as being not normal women, whatever the hell that means. And of course, does this not make the position of the feminist worse than what she perceived my trespasses on equality to be? Then there is this claim by the feminist orthodoxy that gender does not matter. Why then, pray tell, does it matter the gender of my favorite musicians? Had I only listened to male musicians, it should matter or not matter just as much as if I had only listened to female musicians. Of course, what the feminist hive mind say and what the feminist hive mind do are on opposing poles, as bipolar as the fluctuating Norwegian spring. Picture now a man asking a woman listening solely to female musicians if she listens to any male musicians at all. If the answer is no, she is empowered and she is empowering other women. If you get an answer at all, the probable, and to be honest, only reply worth anything to such absurd and downright stupid questions should always be, does it even fucking matter, you twit? I cannot for the life of me picture the reasoning behind making gender a factor in what art or culture one enjoys. If one enjoys it, one should enjoy it, despite such obvious arbitrary factors as the gender of the artist. And other people would do well to not try and shame someone for what music or art they enjoy or do not enjoy based on the same. Just keep your fucking snivelling busybody snoots out of other people's hobbies and interests and lives. Why, in the name of all that is holy, is this so incredibly difficult to comprehend? Why is it so incredibly important to seek control over the doings and goings and hobbies of others? Let be, and let others let you be. Gender does not matter, they scream and roar and screech and rage, except when it does, and when it does, it is when we decide that it does. And they decide that it does whenever they spot an opportunity to win powerful victim points and thereby be granted protection and provision by portraying themselves as weak, frail, powerless, yet strong, brave and powerful, all at the same time, in the infinitesimal and infinite loop of feminist gobbledygook. It is, in all honesty, incredibly clever, very cunning, very sly and very, very manipulative. If gender does not matter, they should cease harping on and on about the wickedness of men and the saintliness of women. If they should start thinking the way someone who actually considers the genders to be equal, and as such treats them equally does, they would come to the realization that victim does not have a gender, just as victimizer does not have a gender. They would come to the realization that shitty people do shitty things, and that this should be treated as shitty people doing shitty things, not as a gender doing this and the other gender doing that. They would come to the stark realization that humanity is composed of individuals, each one as complex as the next, and that any shitty behavior should, first and foremost, be treated as the shitty behavior of that individual, disregarding gender in both the judgment of and subsequent punishment of said shitty person exhibiting said shitty behavior. This is not, of course, to say that one should not look to statistics and consider groups more at risk for this or for that, or more at risk for doing this or for doing that. This is of course a helpful tool. The problem arises when the simplistic, black and white thinking of feminism points to these statistics, see more men than women doing bad and then pointing to this as proof that there is something wrong with men, disregarding, in the process of assaulting masculinity, other factors and variables contributing to this, such as parental alienation, childhood neglect, childhood abuse, culture and so forth and so on, as well as disregarding the inherent biological differences in the male and female brain, making us very different creatures in how we cope with difficulties, in how we cope with trauma, and in how we cope with life. Now, we could probably get into skewed statistics, into ideologically driven and as such biased research. We could get into the fact that there are more options and more empathy available to women who fall outside of society, or the very gendered approach to therapy, and on and on. I think, however, that this would cause this ramble to be longer than anyone would be willing to listen or to read, so I'll leave that topic for another time and another place. Suffice it to say that feminism crafts the world in very simplistic ways, seeing only black and only white, with no room for nuance and no room for opinions or facts that go contrary to their holy dogma, and that they package their dogma and their doctrine in language designed to sound intelligent, to sound complex and nuanced, but that it boils down, at the end of the day, to men bad, women good, presented in the dissonant and convoluted monochromatic language of the feminist jungle where madness and gibberish intersect. I have found it very interesting, over the course of the past 2 years or so, to view the difference in reaction to violence perpetrated by women and violence perpetrated by men, in particular domestic violence in heterosexual relationships. All I can say to this is quite simple. For all their talk that gender does not matter, for all their talk that there are no differences between the genders, the feminist hive mind are sure as all hell willing to let a woman abusing her partner get off scot-free by claiming differences in strength and in size, by stating, quite emphatically, that gender matters. Of course, this goes for all of society. Considering, however, that feminism is supposed to be the force fighting for equality, I find it more than fitting to drag them out of the shadows and to put them front and center in this travesty. Where are your calls for equal treatment of the genders when women are perpetrators of domestic violence? A hushed silence envelops the room. A strange cobweb floats from the ceiling. The silence becomes profound, then broken by a whispered voice vibrating, as if scared, trembling and childlike. It is different when it is a man being violent. The voice, barely a whisper, continues. She probably defended herself against him, violent brute that he is by virtue of being male. See how innocent and frail she looks. Do you not wish to protect her? If gender does not matter in the frail and fragile philosophy of feminism, surely it should not matter in all areas of life. Because it looks to me as though it sure as all hell matters when women are perpetrators of violence and men are the victims. Just your standard doublespeak, your virulent serpent tongue, your fantastical notions of equality standardized to mean protection of women, privileges to women, provisions and pampering to women at the behest of men, even when men are victims and women are perpetrators. Because when men are victims at the hands of women, they must have done something. Victim blaming to hell and high heavens, normalizing and trivializing the suffering of men to shine a spotlight on the suffering of women and only women, even when that suffering is only suffering as perceived by feminism in the choice of a woman to be a stay-at-home mom or a housewife or any other choice which the feminist gobbledygook decides is not a proper choice for a woman. Because women should be free to choose. But if they choose something feminism disapproves of, they have no choice in the matter and must therefore be shamed and forced to submit to the feminist army, gathering under a banner that tells women that they may choose as they wish, as long as they choose what feminism decided is their choice. And don't any of you silly, stupid, uneducated women dare protest the choices made for you. Because feminism knows what is best for you. Surely this is a deity under whose loving embrace we shall all be smothered to death in the name of love and of compassion and of justice for all. And I can ramble, and we can object, and we can protest, and we can wish as much as we wish to see a change or see actual equal treatment come shining through the broken remnants of our societies. We can hope for this or for that, and we can write angry letters to empty-headed politicians more interested in their own careers than they are in the people they are supposed to represent. We can, and we must. But what is more important, I think, I believe, I honestly feel with all my heart and gut and balls, is for men and women alike to reject this perplexing victimhood narrative, to not be suckered in by the preying upon our very natures so eloquently utilized as a weapon by the feminist machine, to consider women as human beings just as we would consider men to be, to hold both to equal standards of responsibility and individuality, to stop the either-or thinking the feminist claptrap have suckered us into, to respect the personal choices and personal autonomy of both men and women and protect or not protect both equally. To consider the very simple fact that if the feminist bullshittery considers it proper conduct to label all men as trash, then they should also consider it proper conduct to label all women as trash. After all, that would be treating the genders equally. Hold these pestilent bastards to their own standards, and watch their paper castles crumble as they realize that their mental gymnastics can only go so far when more and more people wake up to the fact that what we have been presented with for decades as the one true voice of equality is nothing more than yet another totalitarian ideology seeking supremacy for one segment and one segment only of the population, and then only if this one segment of the population falls in line with the orthodoxy of the party. Just as I tend to find God in my morning coffee, I tend to find hope in the fact that more and more people are waking up to the hogwash of feminism. More people are rejecting it, even if it doesn't seem that way in my darkest moments and in my darkest dreams. The very simple fact of the matter, I think, is that feminism is our greatest ally when it comes to making people wake up to its double plus good doublespeak. Because the more these horrid harpies squeak and squawk on primetime television or in newspapers or on the wide, whimsical, wondrous world of the internet, the more people will see that their actions and the dictionary definition to which they always point when faced with backlash do not align. That for all their squawk and squeak of equality, their actions and their vitriolic, unhampered, uncontrolled and unchecked rage and pure, radiant hatred of men as a group and masculinity as a whole shine through their garbled word salad masquerading as a quest for equality. People can only be fooled for so long before they say, to borrow a legendary phrase from an equally legendary song from a legendary band. We won't get fooled again. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this ramble as well as my other ramblings. Please consider sharing, liking, subscribing and all that jazz. That would help the message, such as it is, be manspread far and wide. Take a look at the links down below as well, if you please. Catch you next time.